Hey guys and gals, this is the second part of the what if Linda was in Halo 2. Now you might be wondering, didn't he just do this? Yes I did. But while the other what if had tackled Chief and Linda being sent to Delta Halo, this will include the hurdles of Halo 3 ODST, a different scenario of the aftermath of my Halo Combat Evolved scenario, and ultimately, I feel justified to make this separate timeline because I felt like it was more fun. You'll see what I mean. So for the first part of the video, it's gonna be the same if you watched the previous one. Just skip to the time here.
Did anyone else make it?
Scanning. Just dust and echoes. We're all that's left. We did what we had to do for Earth. An entire Covenant armada obliterated, and the Flood. We had no choice.
Linda interrupts and contacts Chief on the dropship. Check again, Cortana. Cortana is confused as how she could have missed it, but she detects several cryopods floating about starboard. Just before informing Chief, she notices one more blip on her sensors, a pelican. The pelican is adrift out, floating in darkness, but Cortana says she detects several life signs aboard. Originally, this is where Chief picks up Linda's cryopod and the Marines on the pelican. They come aboard the longsword, including Johnson, but this time, Chief is flying a Covenant dropship, which makes it near impossible for the Pelican survivors to get on board the dropship. Human and Covenant technologies have almost opposing ideologies. Linda comes up with a plan instead. She will take her Banshee to the Pelican to check on the survivors. When she boards the Pelican, she finds Johnson. Just like Master Chief, she immediately moves in to neutralize him. "We saw you get attacked by the Flood. How are you alive?" Linda pins him on the floor with her giant Mjolnir boot and a magnum trained directly between Johnson's eyes. The rest of the Marines and ODSTs on board are hesitant to get in the Spartan's way, but he speaks up. "I guess these rotten bastards don't like the taste of badass." As he raises an eyebrow, Cortana confirms that she only detects human life signs on board. Linda lets Johnson off from underneath her 1,000-pound suit, and she gives him a hand up. Linda sees the Pelican is all but functional. "We got no power left, and air is gonna start running out real soon," Johnson tells Linda. They hatch a plan. The ODST's gear is still space-worthy, so Cortana suggests they use the Banshee to ferry passengers one by one to the dropship, since the Covenant systems will interface together. The Banshee shields will protect them from the radiation coming out from the Halo's explosion and the vacuum of space. After the ODSTs are done, they'll strip their armor, and Linda will bring it back to the Pelican, since her Spartan armor will allow her to free float through space. In this manner, they'll be able to transport the passengers that don't have space-worthy equipment. Once they're almost done, things pick back up to the way it happened in the books. They notice Covenant ships coming in to intercept them. They want to board and steal one, but this time, they aren't very worried about sneaking in without being blown up. Instead, once all Pelican passengers are safe, Cortana sets the Banshee to crash into the Pelican and make it look like they were fighting. With that, the dropship will fire on the Pelican to destroy it, convincing the Covenant that they're on their side. Once destroyed, they will broadcast Covenant codes to get on board the Covenant flagship, claiming to have captured the Master Chief. Conveniently enough, Cortana uses Linda's Spartan armor to take a picture of the Master Chief on the floor with no weapons. They cleverly hide the fact that there's a bunch of humans on the other side of the camera. Once on board the Covenant ship Ascendant Justice, everything goes the same as in the books. They eventually make it back to Earth. The events of Halo First Strike happen almost exactly the same. Only difference is that Linda helps out more this time since she is basically half dead. Again, I don't want to bring much of the books into this since the book covered just a lot of background type events. I just felt that it was important to include a quick little rundown of how Chief and Linda made it back to Earth.
Tell that to the Covenant.
Missions 1 and 2, the Heretic and the Armory. These aren't really missions per se, but the cutscenes do end up playing out similarly. Only differences are, while the soon-to-be Arbiter talks about the Master Chief being on Halo, instead he says there was several demons. With how effective Linda and Chief were, he says there were a dozen of them. The Arbiter isn't really lying or exaggerating though. He says so because that's what the reports said. Reports mainly from grunts and jackals that ran away cowering for their lives. As for Linda and the Chief, they are both getting upgrades on board Cairo station, and they are both going to the ceremony, not just Chief and Johnson. Linda gets an upgraded sniper rifle from some of the technology Cortana learned about while on Halo. If you played Halo 5, you know the Nornfang. basically one-shots everything and does massive damage against vehicles. This isn't the Nornfang, but for now, it's effectively the same. Not like she needs it though, she is hyper lethal with any long-range weapon. Also, while they were aboard the Covenant ship, she took one of their beam rifles, and now she's dual-wielding sniper rifles on her back with a sidearm. Mission 3, Cairo Station. While this mission once again plays out the same as in the original and my other What If, this is where things start to change. At the end of the mission, Chief heads down to Earth, and in the last video, Linda was already on her way to Earth. This time, Chief stays in orbit instead. She goes down to Earth while Chief has other orbital defense stations to defend. Chief is needed down on Earth, but Linda will help assure the Covenant have a much tougher time on Earth. Chief plans to go down to Earth to help with the fighting, and just like how Lord Hood wants him to see why the Prophet landed on Earth on Halo 2, that's the plan. But something important comes up right before Chief heads out. Mission 4, Outskirts. This mission is exactly the same in terms of what Master Chief was doing, Linda does instead. So as the Chief prepares to head down to Earth, he gets a new mission. The Chief is then sent to the ship Abundant Malice. He is tasked with either retrieving the onboard AI or destroying the ship. The Covenant disabled the ship before it could enact the Cole Protocol, or so they think. For those who don't know, the Cole Protocol basically dictates that any human ships and AI cannot come under enemy control. It kind of just says that if you have to either self-destruct or make sure the Covenant destroy you, but nothing can come under Covenant control. Here we get Master Chief doing some zero-gravity combat against elites and brutes with jetpacks. As he makes his way into the remains of the Abundant Malice, he fights through the ship as it is infested with the Hunter worms. He manages to infiltrate the ship and take care of all the Covenant forces before they can get any info. Master Chief disables the communications jamming device on board after killing all the Covenant. Almost all the Covenant anyway. All of this happens while Linda is down on Earth through the events of Mission 4. Mission 5, Metropolis. This is once again exactly the same for the part that happens down on Earth. Linda is doing her best to take care of the scare of harassing New Mombasa. Meanwhile, back in space, the captain, unaware that there's a Spartan on board clearing the Covenant, has started the Cole Protocol manually. Chief manages to rescue the remaining crew of the Abundant Malice as they had taken shelter on the bridge of the ship, sealing the door so the Covenant couldn't get in. The captain realizes their comms are no longer jammed, and he tells the Master Chief that the ship is gonna blow up. He explains to the Master Chief that between the senior officers, the captain, a few Marines, and a squad of ODSTs, they had managed to stay alive, repel the Covenant from the bridge, and bought the crew enough time to start the self-destruction. But now there's only one escape pod left, so there's not enough room for all of them. So he has Cortana program a course for the escape pod, and he, alongside a few Marines and ODSTs left alive, instead take the remaining ODST drop pods to head down to Earth. The Master Chief is tasked with finding out why the Prophet landed on New Mombasa. The outro is Chief dropping into orbit when the Covenant heads into slip space toward the Halo. Master Chief and Cortana have now been left behind on Earth. Mission 6, the Arbiter. Missions 6 and 7 are similar, but they are Arbiter missions, so Linda doesn't really affect this. However, the events of Halo Combat Evolved do, and as opposed to my other What If, I'm gonna change it up a little bit here too, so it's worth watching. The Arbiter mission is almost the same, but instead of waiting until the next mission to see the Flood, we see them here. The Flood here is smart, as the Gravemind might have left this impression on the minds of his victims. Therefore, the Flood here are way smarter than in the original version. With all the Flood here, the Shipmaster contacts the Covenant hierarchy, except the storm on the planet has interfered with the comms. The Shipmaster notes that there is too much Flood for them to combat, and his forces are not adequate for this task, but he refuses to pull back and dishonor himself, especially with a heretic on the loose rebelling against the Great Journey. The Shipmaster and his forces press on, following the Arbiter. Mission 7, the Oracle. This time there's less chasing of the heretic, and it's more trying to survive the Flood and get to the heretic. Just like how he seals himself in this room, the heretic does it again, but instead of the Arbiter doing all the work, this time the Arbiter goes to cut the cables while the rest of the Shipmaster's forces wait for him outside. By the time the Arbiter gets back there, the heretic is already dead, but so are the rest of the Shipmaster's forces except for a couple elites and a couple of grunts. They managed to defend against the heretic and the Flood, but the rest fell and were turned into Flood. When the Arbiter meets up with them, he finds a heavily wounded Shipmaster. He tells the Arbiter to listen to the Oracle, 343 Guilty Spark, and Rataz, the Shipmaster, acknowledges the Arbiter with respect and honor. In his eyes, he has redeemed himself for the elites, with Rataz's last words being,
"The prophets lie and scheme. Do not let them dishonor the covenant we made with the gods."
343 speaks with the Arbiter, telling him what the real purpose of the Halo array is. This basically confirms to the Arbiter that the prophets are liars and have been manipulating the Covenant for their own agenda. Tartarus arrives, but without the forces necessary to defeat him, the Arbiter stays silent. Now with the new allies and the Shipmaster's battle companions, he sets out to expose the truth. Let's stop right here for a moment. The rest of Halo 2 plays out kind of similar, except it's Linda instead of Chief. So we will come back to Linda and the Arbiter after we focus on what happened with Chief when he was entering orbit, as his drop pod got redirected by the slip space rupture. Mission 7.5, Uplift Reserve. Master Chief, having crash landed on the outskirts of New Mombasa, begins his campaign into the city. Still crawling with Covenant, New Mombasa is under siege all over, but Cortana suggests his first stop to be at Oni headquarters, so she can try to get in contact with Admiral Hood. Chief is a symbol of power on the battlefield, ultimately rallying all the Marines and ODSTs and cops left in the city to his location. As information spreads out about how the Master Chief is fighting alongside them, kind of like how in the mission Kisingo Boulevard, all human forces are rallying together. Mission 8, Delta Halo. Not much to say here, it all goes down almost exactly the same, except for a lot less elites to fight, and this time there are brutes in place of those honor guard. Just like at the end of this mission originally, Johnson and Miranda plan to go get the index in the meantime. Mission 8.5, Oni Alpha Site. Chief pushes through all the Covenant on Oni base and has the human forces gathered there. Once in contact with Lord Hood, he's told to continue his mission to find out why the Covenant landed here and where they were headed. Cortana has analyzed all the data they had from Oni at this point and informs Chief of the ODST's mission to get the superintendent from under the tunnels. Mission 9, Regret. Very much the same ordeal, but this time the elevator ride when we hear the prophets of mercy and truth are coming to the second Halo. Those messages are different, and since Cortana isn't there to intercept them, it's Miranda who lets Linda know. The prophets will take some time to get there. The prophets are hoping that the news of finding another Halo, another one of the sacred rings, will bring some of the elites back into the fold. Linda and Miranda are both confused by that since they didn't know the Covenant had any inner conflicts. The mission ends with Linda carrying out an assassination on the Prophet of Regret. She takes a grunt's pistol from outside the temple. She cuts open a brute and drenches herself in brute blood to mask her smell. She takes the plasma pistol and overcharges it, trains her sights on the target, fires. 2 shots, 1 microsecond apart from one another. Her first shot with her left arm, a superheated, overcharged plasma pistol, snaps into the back of the Prophet of Regret, followed immediately by a shot that cuts through Regret's head. No time to react. His skull explodes into pieces. The honor guard, stunned at the horror and angered by the loss of their leader, begin to frantically search for Linda. And as the shot from her sniper still rings out and echoes in the temple's chambers, she has already stowed her sniper away and took leave. The only thing the brutes find afterward is an overheated plasma pistol on the floor besides a pool of blood carrying the stench of brute. Linda heads outside to ride the gondola back, but waiting for her is a pelican. She's to meet up with Johnson and Miranda at the library and help them take the index. Mission 9.5, Kikowani Station. With Cortana's intel on Veronica Dare's mission, the Chief makes his way through the streets of New Mombasa to head into the tunnels. Along the way, he encounters the rookie's friend or foe tag pointed out by Cortana. Chief climbs up to his pod and rescues him from it, essentially waking him up about 4 hours earlier than originally. The rookie accompanies Chief as his comms don't work yet, and Cortana insists that if he was left alone in the city, it would be surely death for him. In the aftermath of the Covenant slip space jump, Chief and Rookie manage to get to the tunnels. Mission 10, Uprising. Mission 10 is a whole lot different this time, and yes, I know this is supposed to be Sacred Icon, but hear me out. This instead takes place almost right after Mission 6, the Arbiter. See, after the death of the Heretic and the death of the Shipmaster, the Arbiter went back to the Prophets and confronted them about what Guilty Spark said. He confronts them about what 343 Guilty Spark tells him about the rings. The Prophets do not get a chance to deny this, as there are both elite honor guards and Tartarus brutes present. They just say it's heresy. The Arbiter fails to kill the Prophets as the brutes stop him and they imprison him. The Prophet of Mercy insists that they killed the Arbiter now. It's just like carrying out his execution sentence, since they had already sentenced him to death after the explosion of the first Halo. But the Prophet of Truth tells him that would only make him a martyr. Just a few days ago, they agreed with him being a great asset to the Great Journey, and now he has turned against it. It would raise a lot of questions. Instead, they will remove the elites as honor guards and say that they have failed to protect them. They have Tartarus and his brutes kill the honor guards that heard the Monitor and the Arbiter. This has raised a lot of suspicion amongst the elites. Little do the Prophets know that the other elites that survived the mission against the Heretic have begun spreading the word of what the Oracle said, and that Shipmaster Ratas gave his blessing to the Arbiter. And now that the elites have been removed from honor guards, and they have mysteriously been killed, the elites commence the Great Schism. They start separating from the Covenant. This time around, the mission starts on board High Charity. The Swords of St. Helios, just like in Halo 5, Mission14.5, Free the Arbiter, they want to hear his truth about the Oracle and what happened to the elites serving the prophets. Instead of the sacred icon being their target, it's getting to the mausoleum of the Arbiter. They plan to take back his armor and of the ancient warriors they held so much respect for, but fighting has broken out all over High Charity. They manage to make it to the mausoleum, but only get the Arbiter's gear and the first Arbiters. They bow to return with the heads of the prophets and take back the armor of their people. Mission 11, High Charity. This mission ends up taking place more in frame with the rest of the events of Delta Halo. Now that the Great Schism has been going on for about a month, the majority of the elites side with the Swords of Zanghelios, but some stayed as part of the Covenant, and others stayed as spies. They get word that the second Halo has been found and that High Charity is preparing to go there. Now knowing that if the Halos are activated, everyone will die, the elites take whatever forces they have and try to stop High Charity from going to the new Halo. However, they are heavily outnumbered. Fortunately for them, most of the ships are controlled by the brutes, so the fighting isn't entirely one-sided, but there's still not really a chance to win. Instead, they want to use elite spies on board High Charity to transmit codes to Delta Halo, back to the Arbiter's fleet. The elites get the coordinates, but in the process, they get discovered and killed. So the Arbiter grabs a group of elites, hunters, grunts, and heads into High Charity. The mission is basically the fight he faces while on High Charity. They manage to get the coordinates and they escape High Charity. The Swords of Zanghelios split into two. Half head back to the home world, while the other half head to Delta Halo to try to beat the prophets there. If they can get there first, they can set up to defend the Index, the library, and the control room. If worse comes to pass, they might have to ally themselves with the humans, but that beats being the prophets' puppets anymore at least. Mission 12. Gravemind. Miranda and Johnson manage to acquire the Index. By this time, Linda has caught up with them and is escorting them through the library. The Gravemind begins to assault them mentally, and the Flood forces are trying to get the Index to make sure Halo cannot be fired, as well as get control of Miranda to take over in Amberclad. Linda has to fight to get out of the library while, and don't hate me for this one, but yes, it's an escort mission. She has to escort Miranda and Johnson out of the library and back to in Amberclad. The mission ends when they make it out of the library, only to find a giant group of elites with the Arbiter at the exit. Ready to fight them, the Arbiter tells his forces to stand down, and instead he and the humans make a temporary truce. When they exit, they see thousands of Covenant ships as well as High Charity above the sky of Delta Halo, all engaged in battle. The Arbiter tells them the Covenant is here to activate Halo, and that must not happen. Mission 12.5, Data Hive. Master Chief and the Rookie have entered the tunnels and soon enough found their way to ODST Veronica. From here on out, we'll just call her Dare. She tells them the same thing about how she was sent to get or delete Superintendent. There are a lot of brutes down there that can smell her, so she was preparing a way to mask her scent. In this version, the Oni building did not get blown up. Instead, the humans refortified it. So the buggers didn't wake up after going into their hibernation style sleep when the Prophet of Regret left Earth. They haven't been woken up, so if they go in with silencers, it will be a lot faster. And with Chief waking up Rookie faster and sooner, it's not even nighttime yet. Overall, things are moving much faster in terms of Earth. Cortana tells the Chief to plug her into the network. She makes contact with the engineer, not the Superintendent. Cortana is a much more powerful AI than the Superintendent, so she immediately notices it's not the Superintendent, because it's even smarter than her. She copies her subroutines and tells the Chief to pull her out quickly. Chief asks Cortana what's wrong. She tells him it's the engineer, not an AI. Chief has seen engineers before, and Cortana knows everything Halsey and Oni knows, as well as having been plugged to the control room in Halo Combat Evolved, and she controlled the ship that took them back from Halo's explosion. So she's extremely well knowledgeable on the engineers. She has her copied self in the system contact the engineer and asks who it stands with, the Covenant or humanity. It replies with one word, Sadie. Mission 13, Quarantine Zone. The mission starts with Miranda trying to contact in Amberclad, but the Flood has already taken control of it. To the elites, that's good news, as it means there's only 3 who can activate the rings, and they are here with them. So essentially, they have all 3 possible reclaimers, and they have the Index, which means the Covenant won't win here. But now that they have to cross the quarantine zone, it's full of Flood, so it's gonna be much tougher to get out of there. As the mission starts, the in Amberclad crashes into High Charity on the skybox above. The Arbiter says that they have to take the humans back to his ship and leave Halo. They can regroup with their main force back on Zanghelios, and they will be secured. Johnson sees that they're basically gonna be hostages, and Linda is ready to fight her way out of this. But Miranda says it's okay. Miranda says There's a change of plans though. They need to get back to Earth to stop the forces Regret called in, because they could capture more humans and they might use them to find another Halo, or they would be back at square one or worse, never even find out that the Covenant found another Halo. They fight their way through the Flood, but they acknowledge that the Flood will find a way to leave Halo. They hatch a plan to destroy the In Amber Clad, which in turn will destroy Delta Halo and hopefully take out as much of High Charity and the Covenant as possible. Mission 13.5 Quick to Adjust. The combined being that is now Virgil and the engineer Quick to Adjust answers Sadie, the human that Virgil's subroutine was tasked with protecting. Taking this as a sign that the engineer is more or less on the human side, Cortana gets in control of the cameras and sees that the engineer has betrayed the Covenant and has locked itself up. Cortana's subroutine copy stays in the system in order to activate some new Mombasa defense systems. Main Cortana tells Chief that they can leave that part of her there to help out the entire city defend itself better. They then make their way to the engineer. The fight is easier as the Chief is there, the buggers aren't awake, and the second Cortana is taking every system she can to separate the attack from the brutes. She's blocking doors, paths, and such to help Chief, Dare, and the rookie get to the engineer. Once they get there, they rescue it, and the engineer and Cortana start exchanging information. Now Cortana knows the Covenant found a portal to the Ark on Earth. She tells the Master Chief that they have to get this engineer back to Lord Hood. The sub Cortana insists that she stay in the system of New Mombasa, as it will be easier to help the entire city defend itself now that Virgil / Quick to Adjust engineer has given her full access. The EMP, the slip space jump, took out a lot of things, but the Marines and ODSTs up on the ground have been working on getting things back up and running from Oni base. Master Chief doesn't want to split Cortana into parts, but she tells him that they can come back for her anytime. Plus, whatever processing power she's losing leaving that part of herself here is more than made up with the help of the engineer. The goal is now to get back to Oni base. Mission 14. Alliances. The new elite human alliance now faces 3 problems: getting off Halo, the destruction of In Amber Clad, and the Flood spreading into High Charity. Linda points out it's really only one problem: the Flood. They have to stop the Flood from leaving Halo. Miranda says that her codes can detonate the In Amber Clad's engine, which will in turn destroy both In Amber Clad and High Charity as well as Halo. There is no Cortana here, so they have to do this manually. So the plan becomes Linda fights through High Charity to get into In Amber Clad, and with Miranda's codes and neural implants calibrated to Linda, she damages the engines and blows up the ship Halo 1 style. Meanwhile, the elites will be standing by, forming a perimeter around one side of High Charity so she can escape. But they all basically know this plan is bullshit, because that's pretty much a suicide mission. Seeing the value of a Spartan, and knowing that 2 Spartans basically alone defeated the Covenant that was on Halo, the Arbiter gets angry at this plan. The Arbiter says,
"I will not dishonor your death with such mockery. This is no plan."
The Arbiter gets word that the Flood is spreading through the fleets like gangbusters. Seriously, in minutes it had spread through most of High Charity. It began sending Pelicans and Phantoms and dropships to spread to the Covenant fleet as well as the Zanghili ships. The Arbiter commands them to exterminate the Flood with extreme prejudice and pull back away from the floating city. Knowing their plan to get into In Amber Clad is all but impossible, the Arbiter says that they will use one of his ships. Johnson is hesitant. He questions the Arbiter, not believing he's willing to sacrifice one of what few ships he has left to do this, but Linda and Miranda believe him. They board several Phantoms and head back to the Arbiter's capital ship for reinforcements and weapons. Mission 14.5 ODST. This time, with the help of Rookie and Chief, the mission was successful much sooner than in the original, so it's only now beginning to be nighttime, and the Covenant has not yet arrived on Earth with full force. Master Chief, Rookie, and Dare find it much easier to transport the engineer back to Oni base, especially with Cortana basically regaining control of the city systems. Now back on the surface of New Mombasa, Dare is able to contact the rest of Buck's squad. They had heard the Master Chief was on Earth and at Oni Alpha site and gathered anyone who could fight back there, so that's where they were headed. From there, they had been sent out through coordinated efforts, with all other human forces taking missions here and there to spread out and thin out the Covenant forces left on New Mombasa. They set a gathering point for the ODSTs to bring a Pelican and group up with Master Chief, Rookie, Dare, and the engineer. What's left of the mission is basically fighting through the streets of New Mombasa to meet up with Buck and the rest. While safely aboard the Pelican, Cortana continues to communicate with the engineer. This just basically means that humans know why the Covenant is coming where sooner than in Halo 3. Mission 15. The Great Journey. The Arbiter, two of his most trusted elites, a pair of hunters, Linda and Johnson, load up into a Phantom and head towards the downed elite ship. The plan was to sacrifice one of Arbiter's ships, but then Miranda pointed out that they can just use one of the Covenant's downed ships instead of the Arbiter's. Everyone understandably agrees that this is a better plan, but the problem with that is that the flood had been spreading out rapidly, so they wouldn't know what ship would be a suicide and what ship would be easier to get into. However, they did know that one of their ships had recently gone down, and there wasn't much sign of flood, as the Arbiter's fleet had moved in to form a perimeter around it and clear out as much flood from entering as possible. The ship, the Education of Sorrow, had been brought down recently, and the reactor's core had been damaged already, meaning that they could go in and set it to blow up in several ways. Self-destruct, or a timed explosion, or even an overload that they would be able to get out at least. Now on board the Education of Sorrow, the team finds itself fighting pure flood lifeforms, much tougher than they expected. It's a twofold battle. Johnson and the elites head to the bridge to override all safety procedures, while Linda and the Arbiter and the Hunters will set the core reactor to explode with a bomb. It's kind of an escort mission with the Hunters carrying the bomb, but they can protect themselves. Once the elites and Johnson disable every possible way to stop the explosion, they head back to the hangar with the Phantom, but they get cut off and separated. Only Johnson makes it back to the Phantom. One of the elites succumbs to the flood almost immediately and is infected. The other makes his way to the reactor since it would be easier to get back to the Arbiter instead and go the long way around. When they get to the reactor, it is heavily guarded by the flood. The Gravemind finally makes itself known and physically assaults them. Linda, knowing how strong Gravemind is and seeing that this one is much larger than the first one they fought on the original Halo, plans to sacrifice herself and detonate the bomb. But before she can carry out her plan, the other elite joins them. And it's not much help, but instead of the Hunters carrying the bomb around, they form a shield around Linda while she pushes the bomb. The Arbiter in this case helps push the bomb as well as fends off the tentacles from the Gravemind, while the Hunters have their shields raised up covering Linda and the Arbiter, and the second elite is shooting back at the flood, slowing them down. The Gravemind can't blow up the bomb and risk completing their plan for them, but it can't stop them either, so it changes strategies. The Gravemind leaves while the flood keep on trying to stop Linda's push. The flood focuses on weakening the Hunters and ends up killing one of them as a result. The second Hunter goes into a frenzy and begins killing everything in sight, but takes a lot of damage in the process. They finally get inside the core reactor room and plant the bomb, but the tentacles manage to disable the bomb without them noticing. See, the Gravemind knew the Arbiter was going to protect Linda from the tentacles, but neglected to notice one of the tentacles slowly disabling the bomb. Now that they have no other option but to blow the bomb up by hand, the accompanying elite takes out a sticky grenade, and the Arbiter stops him. The Arbiter says,
I cannot ask you to do this alone. There is no honor in letting others sacrifice on your behalf.
The other elite disagrees. He says,
The Sources and Helios will need a strong leader in the fights to come. Lead our people to the honor we once held before the prophets twisted our world into their image. Free San Helios.
The Hunter, having slightly calmed down from his rage, puts its shield between the two elites and raises its gun. They will both stay back and make sure this bomb detonates one way or another. The second elite says,
Hurry.
And so Linda and the Arbiter take leave. Second half of the mission is escaping the ship and heading to the Phantom, which Johnson is waiting on. We have a Halo escape run like in Halo 1 and Halo 3, but this time it's on a Revenant. They get to Johnson and they leave the ship, head into Arbiter's capital ship. They jump to slip space just as the explosion is starting. The slip space portal closes right before the explosion reaches them, but we see the explosion go past where the Arbiter's forces were and right into High Charity. The ring cracks into pieces similar to the previous Halo, and half of the Covenant Armada in orbit around Halo is seemingly obliterated. But the camera cuts off before we can see just exactly how much damage was really done. The Arbiter's fleet arrives on Earth. With Earth ready to blow them out of the air, Miranda contacts Lord Hood, telling him to cease fire, that the elites are not their enemies, not anymore. We see Lord Hood on screen.
Come again, Commander?
He says while Master Chief standing next to him and the engineer and ODST squads are on the background. Miranda says, Sir, I think we may have a way to finish this war. She smiles and then the credits. The secret legendary cutscene, however, shows the aftermath of the explosion of Education of Sorrow. Halo is destroyed and a lot of the Covenant ships in orbit are just pieces left. High Charity split in half. Really, it's only about a quarter of the city left, but it keeps zooming in. We see the Forerunner vessel that was at the core of High Charity. Its shields flash blue with a tint of red at the end, only for a split second, and they fade. But we keep zooming in into the vessel as the flood are pouring inside, and the camera starts to follow a single tentacle leading inside the ship, and once it crosses inside the ship, the doors close. So yeah, that was the end of the secondary timeline that I came up with for the What If. I had a lot of fun writing this. I personally believe this second video is stronger than the first one. You guys let me know. I hope you enjoyed it. This took a lot more hours to make considering I had to reread The Flood, First Strike, Ghost of Onyx, replay Halo 2 and Halo 3 ODST, and not to mention replaying parts because my capture card just didn't want to work. Let me know what you thought about the voice recording. I have a lot of trouble having to record and re-record considering there's 5 dogs in the house. But this was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed. Really appreciate it if you would hit the like button, leave a comment, tell me what you think, any thoughts, anything you would add or take out. And if you stuck all the way to the end, thank you, I love you. Thank you for all the support. Hope I earned your subscribe. And I understand there's 2 very different types of content in my channel. And if you don't like one, I can't blame you. Thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day.